beginning of a never-ending dispute. Hello. Today we're going to talk about Israel, a country that is still in conflict. When we talk about Israel, we must start with its capital, Jerusalem. Jerusalem is a holy city for Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. For this reason, Jews and Arabs are constantly fighting for control of it. So why are they fighting? 1. The tragedy of the Jews. According to the Old Testament, about 4,000 years ago, Abraham, the leader of the Jewish people, was told by God to migrate and settle in the land of Palestine, also known as Canaan. Later, Abraham's grandson, Jacob, experienced a great famine in Palestine, and Jacob migrated to Egypt. However, the Egyptians began to enslave the Jews for about 400 years. This persecution is so intolerable that Moses leads the Jews out of Egypt. Moses wanted to return to Canaan, the land of his ancestors, but it was already inhabited by the Philistines, an ethnic Palestinian people, and the Jews fought with them. Eventually, Moses' successor, Joshua, took over the land of Canaan, and Israel was founded by its first king, Saul, around 1000 BC. After the death of King David and King Solomon, Israel was divided into northern Israel and southern Judah, and northern Israel was destroyed by the Assyrian Empire at that time, and the Jews were taken into captivity. Southern Judah was also destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 BC, and the Jews were taken into captivity and scattered. After the Babylonians were destroyed by the Persians, the Jews were freed, and after Persian and Greek domination, the Jews established another dynasty, but were again occupied by the Romans in 63 BC. In response, the Jews of Israel resisted the Romans on 2 occasions. In the First War of Jewish Independence in 670, Rome, angered by its defeat, destroyed the temple in Jerusalem, leaving only the Western Wall, now called the Wailing Wall, standing. In the Second Jewish War of Independence, 132,135, Rome suppressed the Jews, changed the name of the region from Judea to Syria-Palestina, and expelled the Jews. From the 7th century onward, Islamic forces took control of Jerusalem, before being defeated in World War I, until 1917, when the Ottoman Empire took control of the city. The Jews were expelled in 135, and from this point on, they were scattered around the world, maintaining Jewish norms and customs. The largest migration was to Europe, where Christian Europeans discriminated against and persecuted Jews because they believed they were the ones who killed Jesus. This discrimination and persecution led to another wave of migration to Eastern Europe and Russia, where Jews made up nearly 80 of the world's Jews by the end of the 19th century. Tragedy strikes again for the Jews who migrate to Russia. In 1881, Russian Tsar Alexander II was assassinated by revolutionaries. False rumors that the assassin was Jewish led to a massacre. The massacre would last for more than 40 years, killing an estimated 150,000 people. And then another incident happens, this time in France in 1894. A classified French military document is handed over to Germany. Dreyfus, a Jewish officer in French intelligence, is sentenced to life in exile for espionage, the maximum penalty at the time, simply because his handwriting was similar. The case sparks a wave of anti-Semitic protests in Paris. The Dreyfus case sparked the founding of the State of Israel. 2. Immigration to Israel. Theodor Herzl, a Jewish journalist who covered this event, thought, if Jews are discriminated against like this, even in an enlightened country like France, there is no safe place for Jews anywhere in the world. He wrote a book called The Jewish State in 1896. In this book, Herzl argued for the establishment of a Jewish state in the land of Israel, the land of his ancestors, and was the first to implement Nathan Birnbaum's concept of Zionism. In 1897, the first Zionist Congress was held for 3 days in Basel, Switzerland. Uniting Jews from all over the world, the Congress declares the creation of a Jewish state, including the creation of Israel's flag and national anthem. In 1901, the Jewish National Fund is created to buy land in Palestine. This land is now the capital of Israel, Tel Aviv, where settlements are created and people are displaced. 3. The partition of Israel. In 1914, the events of Sarajevo led to the outbreak of World War I. a war between the imperialist countries of Europe. It was fought between the allies of Britain, France, and Russia and their German, Austro-Hungarian, and Ottoman allies. As the Ottoman Empire, which had dominated the Middle East for over 500 years, gradually collapsed, the ambitions of Britain and France became apparent. In 1915, the British made a deal with the Arab leader of Mecca, Sharif Hussein, to establish an Arab state in the Middle East in the event of a British victory, which led the Arabs to attack the Ottomans. In 1917, the British promised the Rothschilds, a Jewish tycoon family, a state in Palestine with more money. The British also made a deal with France in 1916. After the war, the Sykes-Picot Agreement was signed, giving France Syria and Britain Palestine and Iraq. After the end of World War I, Britain struggled to honor these three commitments. 4. Seeds of conflict. In the immediate aftermath of the war, Britain eventually kept its promises to the Jews, appointing a Jewish Zionist to be in charge of the land of Palestine. From this point on, Jewish migration accelerated. In the 1930s, Hitler's rise to power in Germany led to further repression of Jews, and by the late 1930s, the number of Jews living in Palestine had grown from about 13,000 to 400,000, representing 1/3 of the total population of Palestine. In 1936, the Arab Revolt begins and lasts for 3 years, with the Arabs demanding that Britain grant Palestine independence and ban Jewish immigration, a demand that Britain eventually accepts. However, this decision angered the Jews and led to the 1946 attack on the King David Hotel. The King David Hotel was the administrative and military headquarters of the British Mandate in Palestine. The bombing of the building resulted in the collapse of 6 floors and the deaths of 91 people. 5. The beginning of the conflict. The United States, which had surpassed Britain as a superpower after World War II, became involved in Palestine. Harry Truman, the President of the United States at the time, was in favor of the Jews, who had a huge influence in finance, politics, media, press, etc. in the United States. The British eventually turned the matter over to the United Nations, and on November 29, 1947, UN General Assembly voted and passed the partition of Palestine, creating Israel and Palestine. The Palestinians, who had 94% of the land, were reduced to less than 50 after the partition, and the conflict began with the withdrawal of British troops. On May 14, 1948, Israel declares the establishment of an independent state. The United States and the Soviet Union immediately recognized the declaration, thus completing the state. Immediately following this declaration, Arab nations declare war on Israel, and the First Middle East War begins. Led by Egypt, 7 neighboring Arab allies invade under the guise of defending the Arabs of Palestine. But in reality, they invade to take land from the fledgling state. In 1949, the First Middle East War ends in Israel's favor, with Israel gaining 78% of the land, compared to 56% in 1948, and Egypt and Jordan gaining the remaining 22%. Palestinian Arabs lose their land, and about 700,000 refugees settle in what is now the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. The ensuing conflict led to the Middle East oil crisis, the 1972 Munich oligarchic bombing, and the Munich Olympics in 1972. This conflict was not a war between two peoples, and is still ongoing to this day.